Okay, guys, on the last video we left off talking about the newborn bassinet occupancy percentage. So when you flip the page over to exercise 4.6, it gives you the opportunity to be able to work some problems. So let's take a look. Using the statistics in the following report generated for Community Hospital, make the following three calculations, non-leap year round to one decimal place. So you've got Community Hospital, newborn bassinets, and looky there, we've got a bassinet change depending on what month you're in. So instead of what we're used to, with it kind of being listed in the columns for us, it's listed up at the top. But we got this. We're going to be able to do it. All right, so let's take a look at January. So January says we've got 270 in newborn inpatient service days multiplied by 100 over bassinets, got 10, times number of days in the period. January is 31. So that's how you should have set up your percentage of occupancy, or your bassinet percentage of occupancy. And once you do all the calculations, you'll see 87.09. Hopefully on your calculator, your instructions say to round to one decimal place. So we're going to look here, look to our next door neighbor, and our final answer is going to be 87.1%. Remember, we're not forgetting the percent signs on these. So that's January. We'll do one more since it's bassinets and we haven't done those yet. It's pretty easy, kind of that plug and go. I'm going to choose one down at the bottom just because the bed count changes, so why not? So I'm going to choose November. Kind of random, but we'll do November. So November says we've got 730 newborn inpatient service days. How about that? Shannon's phone is ringing. I'm going to pause this. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Let's see here. So we were working November, 730 inpatient service days multiplied by 100 over bed count. So October through December, we've got 30 times number of days in the period, and there are 30 days in November. So that's how you're going to set that up. And then when you place it into your calculator and you do the calculations, hopefully you see 81.11, and you're going to round it to one decimal place. So your final answer is 81.1% for November. Alrighty, move that out of the way. And let's talk about bed turnover rate, which if you read this in your textbook, you were probably like, what the heck is this? So the definition for bed turnover rate can be confusing. So it says bed turnover rate refers to the number of times a bed on average changes occupants during a given period of time, or the average number of admissions per bed per time period. And then it goes on to tell you that it's useful to find out if two time periods have the same percentage of occupancy, but the turnover rates are different. And then they talk about how that affects different units with length of stay, which we're going to talk about length of stay in Chapter 5. So that's the second part of this module for you guys, and we'll start on Chapter 5 next week. But for right now, there are two formulas, and this is frustrating that there are two formulas. There's a direct formula and an indirect formula. I've had students say before that they believe that the direct formula is easier than the indirect, and I'm probably with them on that because there's a lot more math involved in the indirect formula. But anyhow, if you were to follow the formulas, you should be able to calculate the information just fine. So what do I mean? So if you've been given the information like you have in 4.7, you are just basically plugging in this information and going. But you're going to see on your homework that I'm going to post for you that when we do the direct and indirect formula, you're actually going to have to calculate the occupancy rate and then plug it into the formula to be able to use it. You're just not given the information straight up in a table like this, and that just helps you get some practice with some calculation. So let's take a look at exercise 4.7, and I'm going to work both problems since it's two different rates. Okie dokie. So 4.7 has a table, Community Hospital Annual Statistics, non-leap year, 200 beds. And the next block says patients discharged, and this includes the deaths, which is nice for them to tell us that so we don't go out looking for the deaths, 7,054. The average length of stay was 9 days, and the bed occupancy rate was 85%. And so number 1 says apply the direct formula for the turnover rate and round to 1 decimal place. And so the direct formula is the number of discharges, including deaths, over the average bed count. Super easy, right? So how we're going to set this up is the number of discharges. So for number 1, the number of discharges, our table says 7,054. And then from that 7,054, it includes the deaths. It tells us that we're good to go. We don't have to try to figure that out. So the bottom number is average bed count during the period. Our table tells us we have 200 beds. So that's how you should set your problem up. And it does say round to 1 decimal place, so you should get 35.3 after calculations. I'm not putting a percentage sign here because we're not calculating a percent. Excuse me. This figure represents the number of times the bed turned over. So it's not a percentage. It is a number. So in this instance, for this problem, if you were to list a percent sign, this is going to be wrong because it's not a ratio. You're not calculating a ratio or a percentage. You're calculating the number of times the bed turned over. This is bed turnover rate. Okay, so the indirect formula is number 2, and the indirect formula, it's going to be easier in the chapter again. I'm going to say it again because you're just given the numbers and you have to plug them in. So the occupancy rate times number of days in the period over average length of stay, which you've been given all of that information. So number 2, if you take the occupancy rate, which it says it's 85%, and you have to change that back into a number. So you're going to move your decimal 2 places. You're going to multiply that by the number of days in the period. And so we know this is annual statistics in a non-leap year, right? So the number of days in the period annually would be 365. And then we're going to divide that, your formula says, by average length of stay. And we're told here that the average length of stay is 9 days. And so when you do the math for that particular formula, you're going to find 34.47, which is going to round to 34.5 times, which is very similar. You can check yourself, right? It's very similar between the indirect and the direct rate. Okay, so you get those 2 problems to practice with bed turnover rate in your book. You're going to find other practice within not necessarily the matching quiz, but the chapter review. And so it's going to be super important for you to go ahead and work through the matching quiz and the chapter review before you move on to the worksheets that I'm going to post, because this will get you the extra practice that you need, because this isn't a lot of practice on bed turnover rate before you move to the worksheets. But remember, with the worksheets, I just need you to show me that you've tried. It's not going to matter that the answer is wrong, because when you submit on your worksheets, you're going to see in the feedback area where I have worked out the problem, and then I'm going to post a video also of working the problems on the worksheets too. So it's going to be very similar to what you saw in Chapter 3. And remember, if you attempt your homework, and you attempt every single problem, and I can see that you've attempted every single problem, then you're going to end up with 100 anyway, even if you missed every single one of them. The quizzes are a little different. I won't change the quiz this time around, but the worksheets, remember, are always going to be changed to 100. It's just extra practice for you before you get to the quiz. So hopefully working out these few problems in the textbook was a little help. It's a little different This time around, I did a PowerPoint lecture and a separate calculation. I tried to combine them this time, so it made 3 longer videos, but at least you get it all together. So hopefully you liked it this time around, and then the next thing that we'll post will be the worksheet, so keep an eye out for that.